Hello, fellow optimization enthusiasts. I'm Linda Collins, and thank you for joining the CADIO webinar today. I'm very excited to introduce Nick Dionne-Odom, who I just learned has more credentialing than I think anyone I've ever met. He is Nick Dionne-Odom, PhD, MA, MSN, RN, ACHPN, FPCN, and FAAN. He has a bachelor's in nursing from Florida State, a master's in philosophy and education from Teachers College of Columbia University, a master's from Boston College in nursing and clinical ethics, a PhD from Boston College in nursing, and he did a postdoc at UAB on nursing and palliative care. He's interested, of course, in palliative care, in family caregiving, in cancer and heart failure, decision-making. He's interested in under-resourced populations, and importantly for us, intervention development and intervention optimization and clinical trials in general. Nick really knows how to manage a factorial optimization trial, and today he's going to give us some tips about that, which I'm sure you're going to find really interesting. So thanks again, Nick, for being here. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it's so my pleasure. I always feel a little disoriented because I have such star eyes when I see Linda and Kate. And so for me to be doing the presenting always feels sometimes a little weird, even though I think at this point I've done enough to feel dangerous with this type of trial design. I haven't messed anything up too bad yet. So it really is my total delight. So today, really the objective is just to kind of talk a bit about my experiences doing factorial trials and to give some very concrete advice about how to manage these types of trials. So just a couple caveats, a couple things I won't be covering today is actual factorial trial design and the questions that it answers. If you have questions about that, that's probably better on another presentation. This really does dive more into sort of the nuts and bolts of how to actually conduct the day-to-day operations of a trial like this. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm happy to try to answer questions, and obviously there's other national experts here who can also answer those as well. So the other part is that if you have questions or comments, let's make this a conversation and just pitch them away. Sometimes it's hard for me to see the chat as I go along. So
Nick, I just want you to know, I'll take a look at the chat for you, and I'm very comfortable interrupting you, obviously.
Great. Yep. Perfect. So please do that. Please chime in. All of these are, a lot of things are like, I can sort of say generally, and then there's more specific questions. So chime away. So let me see if I can get this to go. So there's my research support. I don't have any relevant conflicts. So often when I give presentations on factorial trial design, I do a bunch of intro, and then I kind of jump to the traditional table that folks see that offers the schema of this type of trial design, where you have the conditions on the left and the components across the top, and then like a sample size. And it's usually at this point when I kind of look across the room and I see people panicking. Like, for those of you not familiar with an EKG, this is someone who's basically having a heart attack or a cardiac arrest. This is what that looks like on paper. And, they're just, they have a lot of reservation about a trial that looks just infinitely more complex than perhaps a traditional two-arm RCT, which more people are just familiar with. And I think that a lot of the stress comes from the fact that there are multiple conditions. They're not just two. I mean, depending on how many component levels you're testing, it can be up to 4, 8, 16, 32, 64 conditions. And I think for a lot of us, when we think of trying to manage a trial like that, it feels like sort of an organizational nightmare. And then, there's a lot of people who have questions about stats and all that stuff. So I do think that a large part of the anxiety comes from just simply managing a trial like this, despite the fact that many people can be compelled by, ooh, I can answer some really cool research questions if I do that. And so I've really thought a lot about how to try to ease people's concerns. Like, there are, in fact, ways and procedures and and structures to a trial that can provide some comfort that things are operating in a very consistent, organized way. And you don't have to stress all the time about managing all these folks and all these conditions. So the path, obviously, for me to feel this type of comfort was not a straight one. And it's really based off of my experiences with an intervention that's currently a trial in process, a fully powered factorial trial called Cascade. Stands for Care Supporters Coached to be Adept Decision Partners. It's a program that helps to increase the skills of family caregivers to provide effective decision support to patients who are newly diagnosed with advanced cancer, make decisions all along that arc of care from the time they're diagnosed until death. And it's led by lay navigator coaches. This is Shanara Das. She's one of our lead navigators, coaches. It's an intervention that's a mix of both phone and in-person interaction. And depending on the condition that you're randomized to, you get anywhere between 1 and 5 coaching sessions using a toolkit. There's 4 components to Cascade: coaching on how to be an effective source of decision support, communication skills training, auto and decision guide training, and monthly follow-up calls. I don't really want to dive too deep into any one of these components. I mean, I think it really just serves as, for lack of a better word, the fodder for me telling you where I'm coming from with this advice I'm going to give you on how to run these sorts of trials. However, if you have questions about these specific components, happy to answer them. They each have 2 levels. For being an effective source of decision support, you either get 1 session or 3. For decision support communication skills training, you get 1 session or none. For the auto decision guide training, you get 1 session or none. And for monthly follow-up calls, you either get 1 call or monthly calls indefinitely for 24 weeks. So those are the 2 levels. So that means this is a 16 condition trial. Again, you have 4 components, 2 levels each. So a 2 to the 4th factorial trial. This is the breakdown. This is the very typical schema. We are powered to have, our targeted sample is 352 family caregiver and patient dyads at the end of the day. And you can see on the far right there the sample size that we're looking for per condition. Just another way to look at the same thing. This is just a consort diagram schematic where one group gets 1 session of the single session of the basic social support effectiveness training. The other group gets 3 sessions. One group gets communication training and the other half does not. Half gets the auto decision guide training and half does not. Half gets 1 follow-up call and half gets indefinite calls for 24 weeks. And then we measure outcomes at 12 and 24 weeks after randomization. So again, this is just sort of giving you an idea of what this intervention is and what the trial design is. So some of the preliminary work, I was in many ways like where many of you may be right now, where I attended training in 2018 to get training in the MOST framework for intervention development and testing, including factorial trials. I actually, in that workshop, wrote a specific aims page, which turned into a study that was funded by the National Palliative Care Research Center. It was a 2 to the 3rd factorial trial, where we really assessed whether we could do this sort of trial and develop protocols and procedures. We looked at how we were able to recruit people in, if people were satisfied, if they were able to complete all the intervention tasks and questionnaire completions. And so that was sort of the first step. We then used this data to then apply for an R01 through the National Cancer Institute, which is now ongoing. I think we're on year 2 or 3. And we're now, this is for a fully powered trial. Again, 352 patient caregiver dyads. It's a 2-site trial, UAB and Emory University. And you can see that our primary outcome is at 24 weeks. So just giving you a flavor of sort of the trajectory here of research for the time I started knowing nothing until now. I was just saying, like, in doing all this work from pilot to the full trial we're doing now, I've kind of learned some different strategies for conducting these types of trials and sort of boiled it down to 10 different ways or 10 different things I think folks should take some considerable time thinking about as you think about leading a trial of this type. So, number one, when you do a pilot, if you're doing this sort of thing for the very first time, I would really think hard about a priori about all the feasibility and acceptability questions and metrics you're looking to ascertain from a pilot. So here's some of those that you might consider. Intervention task and session completion rates. I would look at the total completion rate, for the whole thing and by condition. Here you're just trying to see if there's any one condition where there's a line of components that for whatever reason might be difficult for participants or have issues. I would look at measurement occasion completion rates, make sure that people are completing measures at baseline and whatever your follow-up time points are to make sure that you're going to actually be able to answer the question if in fact you get to the fully powered trial. You want to look at enrollment rates, make sure that you can actually get people into this thing, that there aren't any issues with people feeling reticent about being in a trial of this type. And I'll explain further how we explain this type of trial to a potential participant. Attrition rates and reasons for dropout, I would look both total and by condition. Again, looking for potential conditions where there may be issues with people staying in that condition. I would look at acceptability and satisfaction. Again, so here's 3 ways to look at it. Overall acceptability of the entire trial experience, by condition, so by all the 16 conditions, and then by component, to make sure that folks are okay with the component and the different levels of it, to make sure that, they, in general, they liked it, they found it useful, they found it relevant, and that they felt engaged. I am a big fan of doing sort of a mixed methods approach to at least the piloting stage of intervention development, where one is doing qualitative interviews with participants. I usually ask everything from why did you decide to participate in this trial? What made you stay in? What did you think was helpful? What did you not like? What did you like? I ask all those sorts of questions in these acceptability interviews, and I find it really helpful to not only address questions about the intervention itself, but also about the conduct of the trial itself. Like, what was the experience like for them being consented and completing measures? Some study processes I think you want to refine in a pilot phase are studying tracking and some sort of strategy that accommodates a large number of conditions. And I'll show you some of the ways that I've thought about this. Randomization procedures and masking effectiveness. If you're traditionally done 2-arm trials, it can be a relatively straightforward. Randomization it's not rocket science per se, it just takes a little bit more thought when it comes to randomization and how you want to mask in doing that process. Consenting, recruitment, and retention processes, making sure that those are all refined. Testing analytic approaches to data analysis. If you've never worked with a data set from a factorial trial of any type, this is a good testing ground to just see what the data looks like, get used to finding different ways from analysis to data visualization and what it would look like. I can tell you for my field, it's a little new in palliative care. And so I've had to think a lot about the best way to present this in a way that for researchers in palliative care, they can sort of intuit what they're actually looking at and be able to walk away understanding what the numbers all mean. Refining fidelity monitoring and assessing contamination. Piloting is a good time to make sure that you're keeping everyone in condition. And then talk to interventionists. If you have them, making sure that they're okay, that they're comfortable, that they're not feeling like they're walking on eggshells every time they deliver something, that they're not delivering the wrong thing, and that it's easy for them to deliver. They don't have to think too hard about which components are being delivered, and they can just settle into the intervention and deliver it as you have it designed. So here's some example Factorial pilot trial papers. One is one from our group, and then another is from Carrie Kugler and her group. There are probably others I just haven't looked in the past few months. So if you have done one and you're not seeing it, please send it to me. I'd love to populate more on the slide. So
Hey, Nick,
Yep.
sorry, before
Yep.
you get to tip 2, we have a question that is asking about presenting your information from the pilot in terms of, are you presenting everybody then by condition or a combination of total and condition? Anne Marie, jump in if I did not get your question correct.
And you asked it perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would probably refer you, Anne Marie, to actually both these papers. I'll be totally transparent. I based the table design in that second paper you see there, based off of Carrie Klugler's and what she did in her paper. So I think you'll see very similar things where we basically have a table of effect sizes for those components, which, just to be clear, doesn't mean very much. This is not a fully powered trial. It was actually really meant, in my mind, to try and start educating the researchers in my field about how to interpret data like this. So that's the way that I kind of thought about it. In terms of like, what can you take away? Not much, really. You really can't. So, but I think just in terms of like data visualization for a pilot, check these out. I think there's also good tables in both of these papers that give you a sense of how we try to convey feasibility, like intervention session completion rates by condition and measurement occasion completion rates by condition. So check these papers out. I think you'll take away a couple good ideas for different table formats you might consider to present this type of data. Hopefully that answers your question. So the second little thing here, I would plan ample startup time. I had been a clinical trialist for already about a decade. I've been a part of several clinical trials and published, and so I feel very comfortable with traditional two-arm trials. And I knew that they themselves already took quite a bit of startup time. I think even more startup time is necessary for a factorial trial. And it's because there's just a lot of study tasks to get in order. There's a lot of IRB and regulatory approvals. Many IRBs haven't seen these types of trial designs, and it just takes a minute to get them oriented to how this type of trial design works. There's also participant tracking systems and protocols that need to be developed and fully fleshed out, and those can take a while to put together. Data collection databases and processes, intervention condition materials development. For that data collection the database, definitely test out randomization. You're going to want to make sure that you're very comfortable that when you upload those randomization lists, and we use REDCap, that they operate well, and that that your project manager, whomever it is, isn't sweating bullets every time they push that randomization button. So I would definitely practice that a little bit. Hiring and training study staff and interventionists. Again, if you have a project manager and they've never done a factorial trial, like, it just takes a little bit more time to get them oriented. And so I would spend some time with that. Randomization testing. So I didn't pull this out of anywhere except my own experience. I would say 4 months. Honestly, I would be sweating bullets if you gave me that time frame to put together a trial. I actually feel more comfortable with a year. 6 months, I mean, I could probably make it happen if I had like basically nothing else going on. So anyway, this is to say, if you've never done a clinical trial before, give yourself a year. I think if it's a pilot trial, part of a pilot is developing all these processes. And so I think you could probably do a little less, albeit, believe me, it's a lot of work. But I would plan ample startup time. You really want to make sure that once this thing kind of launches, that you've got this machine pretty well oiled and ready to go. The third point is develop well-conceived tracking systems. So you are trying to manage, 16 or more conditions. So What do I mean by that? It's any software application, and I use Excel, so it's not that fancy. But there's fancy ones out there that provides passive and active decision support concerning the adherence of a given participant throughout the entire clinical trial process, from the time they are screened until the time they complete the last data measurement. You need a system that tracks these folks across every study activity. So here's mine, not that fancy, honestly. It's an Excel sheet. Why Excel? Because I know how to use it. It's everywhere. Most people are familiar with it. And when there's bugs, I can fix it. I don't have to call some company. If you've used other clinical trial software, great. Go for it. There's fancy stuff out there. I used to use a system called FileMaker, and I hated it. So the way the mine works, if you can see my mouse across the bottom, you can see all the phases of the study: screening, approach and consent, baseline, questionnaire completion, and then caregiver and patient questionnaires. We also have after-death questionnaires. We have a statistics tab. So you can see that as you go from left to right, you're basically following people chronologically across the study, from screening to when they finally do data collection. And I would encourage folks to have a single system that does this. Now, I do separate out this tracking from REDCap, which just collects data. I've seen some people track all things in REDCap. I did that once and also hated it. So I've done this approach. But regardless, there is no perfect system. You just kind of have to commit to whatever you're committing to and go for it. This is our statistics tab. So one thing I like about Excel is that it can pull data from every other part of the spreadsheet and calculate statistics so that we know at any one time how many patients are screened and how many are eligible and why they aren't eligible, and all those things, both total and by site. And we even have a little trick where we can put in dates and find dates. So anyway, anything you can do to try and really hone this process of keeping all these things organized, I promise all the work up front will totally pay off when it comes to aggregating all these things for either reporting or whatever else, or just simply monitoring the study itself. Just another screenshot of our statistics tab. This monitors questionnaire completion rates by condition. Those conditions are blinded, but it tells you whenever someone completes questionnaires, it automatically populates. So anyway, this isn't the right system. Whatever system you choose, you just want to make sure that you can track metrics. Okay, number 4. Have a data management plan that keeps randomization and blinding robust. So there's a really great paper on this by Gallus and colleagues. This is probably the go-to paper. You have 2 choices. You can randomize by components or by condition. I've heard of randomizing by components. I'm not ever going to do that, I don't think. I've randomized by condition because it makes a lot more sense to me and it's easier to program into REDCap. But you do have 2 options. I don't think there's a right or a wrong necessarily, albeit I've actually never seen anyone randomized by component, unless Kate or Linda you have, but it's possible. And then you also want to just think about whether you want to use some sort of restricted randomization, like stratification, or maybe you have multiple sites, or you have some demographic characteristic you want to make sure there's an equal spread on. All that can be done. This paper is a really great go-to paper for how to do that. The 5th thing is when you're consenting people, when you're approaching people, I think some of us might be tempted to want everyone to understand the nitty-gritty of factorial trials. I would say don't do that. Folks don't really need to understand, the granularity of how a factorial trial operates. This is a screenshot of our consent form. The way that we describe it is we say we're testing 16 different versions of a program. We want to know which one's best. And here are the 16 different ones. You'll be, like a dice roll. You'll be assigned to one of 16 groups. We can't tell you which group, but we can tell you that you're going to get something. And that's how we explain it. We really don't get any more sophisticated than that. We don't even use the word factorial trial. This is how we explain it. It's worked quite well. We've never gotten pushback or confusion over this thing. In fact, people like that they get some version of something all the time, that they're not going to be in an unusual care group, which is actually one of the nice aspects of this trial design. The next one is to develop separate participant materials for each condition and each site. So, for example, this is some screenshots of our Cascade toolkit, and each toolkit is specifically tailor-made per condition. And I'll show this in a second, but we actually have 16 different folders with each condition, each with its own version of the toolkit for participants, so that we know that they're going to get what's being assigned for that condition. And if you look at this page here, this page is very specific, that describes exactly what they're getting, and that's specific to conditions. So there's conditions where they only get 2 sessions or 1 session or 4 sessions. And for this particular sheet, they're getting 5. And so this tells them exactly what they're getting, and the toolkit already has the materials for their specific condition. So this is very helpful instead of having to like cut and paste different pages of a whole program into some toolkit, because there's a lot of chance for user error there, that if you just have your toolkits pre-made and ready to go, you just have to print them out every time someone's randomized to that condition. I would also say to have different versions of the toolkit for each site. I just find that helpful. If folks have more questions, I mean, you don't necessarily have to do that, but I have found it helpful, and I can go into why later if folks have questions. Oh, yeah, so here's a closer screenshot of that page I was just showing, where again, it's describing exactly what they're getting. So my 7th piece of advice is to develop a very structured orientation and training plan for interventionists. It can also be stressful for them because they don't want to deliver the wrong thing. If you're doing a trial where you actually have separate interventionists allocated to different components, this is probably, I mean, I still think you should train your people, but this is almost, it's a little bit less of a concern, at least in my mind, because you have less of a risk of contamination. However, if you have interventionists delivering multiple components, I think having a very structured training plan is pretty requisite in order to make sure that they understand what this trial is trying to do and what's the rationale for there being so many different versions of the same thing. And the way that I've done this, some people may be familiar with Canvas. If you've ever heard of Blackboard, a lot of universities have this. We've created a training course, quote unquote, on Canvas, where our coaches go through a very structured training program with a checklist and everything, where they go through and they get trained for Cascade, and they do get a little bit of an overview of factorial trial design, so they at least understand that there's a lot of different conditions and why we're doing it that way, and the critical importance of keeping people in condition and them not receiving components that aren't assigned to them. So you can just see a couple screenshots. You know, in the pilot phase of your project, this is a great time to really spend a lot of work, or if you're able to get these materials in place, so that by the time you get to a full trial, you're not scrambling to both hire people and develop the orientation program at the same time. So it's great if you can already have this stuff good to go after the pilot, so that when you hire interventionists, you can quickly get them up and trained by the time you're ready to start enrollment. Just another screenshot there. So very relatedly, in order to, again, ease the nerves of interventionists, developing different materials for each condition. So what does that mean? That means that, so instead of saying condition 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we've named all our conditions by animals. So it's aardvark, badger, crane, dragonfly, all down the line. And it's just conditions 1 through 16. We do that because it's just easier to refer to a certain condition by these animal names. And believe it or not, you actually, after a while, know exactly what's contained in each one once you've used it enough. And so that's one mechanism, is to name, don't call your conditions 1 through 16, but to name them animals or cars or anything else, food, I mean, anything you can think of in your head that you can name and refer to them in different ways. And then these are all, the intervention is manualized, which means there's a script for each interventionist that they use whenever they conduct the intervention with participants. We've developed different scripts for each condition. That way, you don't have the interventionist like scrambling to put together like different components of the intervention last minute to see like, oh my gosh, what condition are they in? Oh, they're in Jaguar. What's in that again? Oh, I need the script for this and this. And they're like all over the place trying to put together the scripts. Instead, you just have one script per condition. They can quickly go to it and just use that one, and they know that they're delivering exactly what the person was assigned. So is it a lot of work to get these set up front? Yeah. Is it worth it? Totally. So that's why I really do stress having the ample startup time so that you can make sure that all your scripts are in order if you choose to do this and to keep people in condition. Here's just a screenshot. This is nothing fancy. It's just, again, we have our individual condition packages all very organized so that all the interventionist has to do is go in and there's the script for that. Toolkit is in there. They can just go in and get that. The charting template, we have a charting template for each session. That charting template is specifically also designed per condition. And they can just copy and paste that into their tracking system to chart. So we're very OCD about where all the individual condition materials sit. We've developed, so whenever our coaches conduct a session, we have them chart on each of their sessions. And another way that we make sure that they're delivering and charting on the right components and component levels, you can see across the bottom there, we have individualized charting templates per condition. So it's actually impossible for them to chart on something that the person's not getting. So again, it's just another way to make sure that folks are staying in condition. So what happens is whenever someone's randomized, let's say it's Dragonfly, the project manager goes in, copies the template for Dragonfly, and then assigns that template to the interventionist. Again, this is nothing fancy, it's Excel, and it works. So that's why we use it, and everyone's generally familiar with Excel. So there's a lot of other programs out there that you can use, but this is the one that we've used just to keep it relatively simple. Yeah. So the ninth thing here is I would strongly encourage having regular supervision meetings with interventionists. Here's how I've always structured our meeting breakdown. We have a weekly coach meeting. It just happens to be on Wednesdays from 11 to 12 Central Time, where the purpose is to review all of their participants, provide supervision and feedback to the coach, and review and discuss difficult cases. We also do, ask what condition people are in and just verify that they're actually getting it. The condition to which they're assigned is another way that one can track fidelity and make sure that the coaches are comfortable with the person's assigned condition. We also have a project management meeting every Thursday where we also review approaches and consents from the prior week. We discuss reapproaches, data collection windows, difficult cases, and we discuss any other project management concerns. In many ways, this is so that you as PI can always provide some support to your project manager, and they can have access to you for any questions that they have and any issues, and they can have some comfort knowing that they will see you at least once a week, and that you'll be there to answer any questions that arise or any study issues that come up. So I know there are teams that do once a month meetings or once every 2 weeks. I probably should do that some for some of these times, but I guess I prefer to have them weekly, even though sometimes they only last like 10 minutes, which is great. But I do like to continually hold those meetings. What else was I going to say about that? Anyway, whoa. So the 10th and final thing I would say is to have a fidelity monitoring plan. So historically for me, that's been, so all of our coaching sessions are recorded. And then we review about 10% of those for a full trial. And we have a fidelity checklist. This is a Microsoft Word version of our fidelity checklist, but we also have an Excel version where we basically check to see if the coaches are delivering all the aspects of the session that are prescribed, so to speak. So when you're doing fidelity, if you choose to do fidelity and listen to recordings, I would check all components, check all component levels. I would check each interventionist, whether it's 10% of each interventionist or at least a full session. And then developing different checklists for each condition and component. So again, it's a little work. It can be a little mind-boggling at first to get these checklists together, but I think having this sort of fidelity checklist again enhances the internal rigor of the study and makes sure that you're not experiencing any contamination and that coaches aren't, or whoever your interventionists aren't going off script, so to speak, with anything they're doing with the intervention, that they're all staying within the confines of what the recipe was structured as. So in summary, the 10 things are knowing the feasibility and acceptability questions and metrics you are looking to address in a pilot. And again, I would stress, if you've never done a factorial trial or if you've never done a trial period, totally do a pilot. You'll feel better. Plan ample startup time. Develop a tracking system that will help you at any one time have a 30,000-foot view of your study and how it's going. I would have a data management plan that keeps randomization and blinding robust. I would keep the explanation of the trial relatively simple when consenting. You can always provide more information for folks who really want to know, but there's no reason to get too terribly complicated with those descriptions. I would also, I think number 5 also applies to IRBs. Again, they shouldn't be there to adjudicate the scientific merit of your trial. They're there to look at human subjects. And so I think in that sense, keeping the description of how the trial operates relatively straightforward and simple. I would encourage developing separate participant materials for each condition and each site. I would have a very strict orientation and training plan for interventionists. I would have separate interventionist materials for each condition. I would meet as much as you can with your interventionist and study team, including your project manager. And then I would have a fairly robust fidelity monitoring plan so that you don't experience any intervention drift with your interventionists and coaches over time. You want your intervention to be delivered reliably over time as you designed it. So, with that, it takes a whole team, and I certainly don't in any way do this by myself. I have an entire little village here of people that help out, including Kate, who's a co-investigator and consultant on this project, that all helps this come together. So if any of you are feeling like running for the hills, just know that when you do these types of trials, like, you typically have a team, and you need a team to help you do all of these things and to stay organized. So none of this is done solo. It's very much a large team effort. So with that, I'd love to take some questions and have some conversation and hear what people are thinking if they're actively doing things now or thinking about it.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I just wanted to say your point 9 about the supervision meetings. As a consultant, distant collaborator on your grant, I really appreciate the invitation to drop into those meetings as well. It gives an opportunity to see how it's working. and I'm saying this out loud because if you put a consultant on your grant who knows most, invite them to those meetings to help with project management. So Nick, one of the questions that came up was about the beautiful tendency of Excel to crash. And if you could speak about some of your strategies to mitigate that.
Yeah. Linda mentioned all my degrees. I think I should also get a degree in Excel. So I do feel like I think it's good to just commit to a way that you want to track stuff in some system or software and just go all in. And I decided to go all in with Excel. I've watched endless YouTube videos of creating formulas and crashes. I've tested these Excel sheets on numerous pilot and trials now. I must have probably 6 or 7 or 8 different versions of this type of tracking system now. And I've gotten really good at making sure it doesn't crash. And I'm sure the moment I say this, it's like gonna crash. But I have actually gotten it to a point where we haven't experienced a crash with crash with Cascade, period, the full trial. For the pilot, we probably had some issues some of the time, but nothing that couldn't be remedied. And then we learned from that and then able to sort of compensate for it. I think where Excel crashes a lot is that the formulas don't work. And I've also learned little things like if you program formulas down an entire column towards infinity, it's definitely going to crash. But if you only fill it out to like 10,000 cells, which is probably all you'll ever need, that actually makes the system more stable. So just things like that I've learned over time, and I don't have as many issues with Excel crashing. And it's great because we can share it. We can post the Excel on OneDrive, which for us is secure, and we can have other sites enter data like at the same time so multiple people can be on. And so for those reasons, I've really liked it. And I also feel good enough to know that I can fix anything that comes up in general. So I don't know, that's why I use it. I mean, don't get me wrong, like if you want to use something like Sheets, which I think is another common one, you know, it's never a bad thing to outsource that to, you know, a sort of a vendor that can help troubleshoot that sort of stuff. So again, no perfect system, pluses and minuses in my opinion.
No perfect system, but could you explain perhaps why you did not enjoy REDCap so much for this type of tracking? Dr. Cantrell is interested in knowing what kinds of problems or issues you ran into or what you might suggest to look out for, especially for those who might be using it for the first time. Jen, feel free to jump in if you want more.
I find REDCap very difficult for interventionists to use for documenting sessions. So many times an interventionist will get a call from a participant on a Saturday and they need to chart that. And in REDCap, you have to pre-populate every single thing that you ever want them to chart on. Although I think there might be a new feature in REDCap now where you can kind of like generate new cells sort of in a live fashion. But I got so sort of fed up. It's also difficult, I found, for the coach to go back in and quickly find an individual in REDCap and then quickly scroll to where they are with the person and easily see all the prior things they've been working with them. So from a coaching perspective, I've just had a lot of experience with them not liking REDCap as sort of a, for lack of a better word, a faux medical record. The other reason I'm not a huge fan of REDCap, albeit there is a workaround here, is that I don't always feel like I have live statistics at any one time. So one thing I like about Excel is that it can pull from any cell and generate statistics. And I know at any moment, like even like right now, like how many people have been screened, how many people have been randomized, how many questionnaires have been completed at 12 and 24 weeks and reasons for it. And I can see it on one dashboard. And I like that. Now, one could do that in REDCap. You can run automatic reports and you can get it figured out that way. I just have a little bit of PTSD from doing this from a prior study, such that I wanted nothing to do with REDCap and sort of participant tracking. I love it for collecting data. Don't get me wrong, great. It's for me, I love it for, measurement occasions and sending people links to complete surveys online. For me, it's great. It's very secure. Everyone can access it from no matter where they are. It's in a cloud. I love that. But I don't love it for tracking and interventionist charting.
But Nick, you do use it for randomization and your data collection.
Yeah, certainly for randomization.
And
Can I just one quick follow-up? So thank you for that explanation. That's interesting. I think another person I know had trouble with it for tracking. What was the other tool that you mentioned that would have a vendor attached to it? Not the Excel, but Sheets or something that you said?
Oh, Sheets.
What is it called?
It's called Sheets.
Oh, okay.
Like
all right.
EETS. If you just search for like Sheets software or Sheets, you'll see it.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's other like clinical trial software. And there's
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I was hoping to kind of integrate it all in one with the REDCap tracking and data collection, just because we have such a complex data situation with sharing and all sorts of things. But I've heard this now from two people regarding the tracking, so I'm kind of concerned about that. So thank you for clarifying.
Just Jen, to give you the flip side, there are other folks who swear by REDCap for all of these things, including Maria Gladz, who we had on a webinar earlier. She worked with a colleague from Langone who coordinated REDCap with R to produce those live statistics. So it's a very emotional, personal choice, right?
Yeah, I think they had some trouble with tracking from it, though. I'm familiar with her stuff, but yeah, she did set up a lot of reports in there, and that was great. We're working on that, but there was an issue with tracking in there that they had to kind of separate out from, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, I'll follow up on that. So thank you for that.
Yeah. So maybe, would you like to ask your question out loud, or you want me to read it?
Yeah, I can do that. I was just, thanks a lot for all of these very, very concrete recommendations. I love that. And I was just curious, with all these tracking systems, then how much time do you spend as a PI checking up on people's tracking? Because I feel like I could spend hours checking how my staff are tracking stuff. So how much do you just lean back and say, trust your systems, and how much do you then check? Is that clear what I'm asking?
Yeah. So for each of our weekly project management meetings, the project manager's role is to pull all data from the prior week, which they can get from the tracking sheet. It's already auto-calculated. And I can see at any one time, how many people did we screen in the past week? I mean, she can even mess with the dates and do past 2 weeks or past month or past year. And we can see those exact numbers, and we monitor them on a week-to-week basis. So in terms of data monitoring, I've always said we do it weekly.
Yeah.
And so our agendas for that project management meeting, for any of you who have attended, I know Anne Marie's been on there, and I see Reed is here. Kate's certainly seen them. We have a very structured agenda with populated with numbers. And all those numbers are just pulled from the statistics tab, and they tell everything from how many Emory has recruited this week, how many UAB, how many people are outstanding for 12-week questionnaires, how many outstanding for 24-week. We do payments as well, and we can track all that almost real time. And that's why I'm so sort of hung up on having a system that gives you that aggregated data instantly. And it might, once you set the system up, you almost take it for granted, but without it, it can be so stressful to try and get all that data together if you don't have it automated in some way. And for me, on my team, the first line of responsibility for data management is on the project manager. And that's, for me, one of the tasks I assign that person, to make sure that there's integrity with the data collection. but we review it as a team every week.
Nick, can I just comment just as an observer too? I think I love what Nick has set up because there's this incredible, really team effort. There's not a hierarchy at all because each person who presents, from my observation, feels a real sense of ownership. And that's just, it's a really great thing to see in team science.
So thank you for saying that, Anne-Marie. This is a nice segue, not super awkward, kind of smooth, into Nick. Could you talk a little bit more about logistics of running, I'm going to say, a factorial trial over multiple sites, and maybe how you got Emory on board?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of aspects to that question.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's perfectly possible to have multiple sites. I think you just want to kind of have a site PI that you feel will give the energy to it that it requires. I would probably centralize as many things within your own institution as a coordinating center. So if it was me, the way I typically like to do it is basically all I want other sites to do is recruit people, consent them, and then if they so choose, they can deliver the intervention. Data collection, randomization, tracking, I like to do centrally because I think with these complex trials, I want to have a close eye and be immediately available to the project manager overseeing these processes. Now, sometimes it can be difficult for other sites to provide information prior to when people are consented because you don't have their consent to share information about them. And so you can give them some sheets, but otherwise I like to have all tracking centralized. I'm not sure this is exactly answering the question because there's many aspects to involving other sites. But I will say that it often takes them longer to come online in terms of like robust enrollment. I would say the folks at Emory are amazing and they're probably about a year behind our start time in terms of enrollment and recruitment. And they're just now hitting steam, but it took a while to get them going. So I would say that when you're working with other sites, you need to involve them. So the other aspect of that is when I have those Friday project management meetings, it's an all-site meeting. So the project manager from Emory is there, the site PI from Emory is there. And even if I had more than 2 sites, it would be an all-site meeting because I really feel that I want to be available to these sites and their site project managers. If they have questions, I want to be able to immediately respond and get those answers so that they can get going. But I would centralize personally as much as possible, including questionnaires, toolkits, like we send all the toolkits. I don't want other sites trying to like manage that. I would rather just centralize toolkits so that we can make them and we can get them out. Anyway.
Carly, was that, you got more?
That's super helpful. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think part of what I'm thinking about is I'm writing a grant and thinking about the budget. So I'm curious if you can speak to like how you were able to work having a project manager. Like, is that someone that your site PI has provided, or are they full-time, or, how kind of more the logistics of that, if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it really does vary based on the scope of the project. I think that, it's all about like, what you expect the site, how many you expect them to recruit, and interventionist time, like how long. I think in general, a site PI needs, at least a 2 to 5% time. And then, the coordinator can vary. I mean, I probably feel I like to have a project manager at least half time, but full time is better. Again, I mean, all of this is totally dependent on the scope of the project, honestly. So it really does depend. But, honestly, Carly, it's up to the site to decide how to spend their money. I mean, yeah, they submit a budget, But once the grant is funded, like, I mean, they have a lot of flexibility over sort of how they use it.
So Jen, I want to get to your question in just one second, but be mindful of time and say thank you for everybody who attended, and feel free to maybe stick around for this one question. But we are recording, and the webinars will be posted to the CADIO website soon. So stay tuned for those things. And we will be announcing a couple more webinars in the coming weeks.
Our next one is May 3rd.
Yes. So if you need to leave, you can. Thank you for being here. Jen, would you like to?
Yeah, I think I kind of already, he spoke to this, but I was just curious about kind of the range of the kind of the reality check on the startup time, which may vary depending on the complexity of the project, prior work that's been done in that area. But I'm just wondering about your experience with that. I mean, you mentioned even up to 8 months could be really tough, even assuming you had prior pilot work. Can you just speak to that a little bit more, your experience with that, or what you've seen from other studies?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to do up front. And I don't know, I guess I gauge it based on how well I'm sleeping at night. So I feel like if I have said I'm going to enroll and it's going to start in January, and it's November, and like there is still randomization testing to be done, and oh my gosh, we haven't hired and trained interventionists yet. Like that sort of stuff can be stressful to me. So I really think that it helps to just have a nice, healthy startup time, because some of these processes and these tracking sheets, I just worry about people that just kind of like rush to put them together and don't like test them at all. And then you get into it and you're like, oh my gosh, like there's something we're not tracking, or it's messing up, or like, things are crashing. And I think that it really behooves just spending a lot of relaxed, not stressed out time putting these systems together so that you can really think through, so that once you get to year 2 or 3, like you can not sit back, but like things are on autopilot, like the system's in place, protocols are good, everyone knows their role, and we're rolling. And yeah. I don't know, that's just how that's helpful. I totally agree and hear ya on all of those issues. So thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, you going to say anything?
No, I'm not going to say anything more except thank you, Nick. This was wonderful and very, very practical and helpful to everyone, I think. I know factorial optimization trial can be a little bit daunting, but we have lots of evidence that if the right care is taken setting it up, they can be run without keeping you up at night. So thank you very much, everybody. And
Thanks, Nick.
Look forward to seeing you.
Thanks for having me.
See you soon.